It was the most well-known event that took place in the Gears of War universe, the day that sparked the 17-year-long war against humanity. Emergence Day. Just 6 weeks after the end of the Pendulum Wars, initiated by the subterranean race of the Locust Horde, emerging from beneath the surface of Sera, the Locusts deployed in nearly every major city on the surface and began their slaughter on the human race. Not only did the Locusts outnumber the human soldiers, they also had a massive army of war beasts at their disposal. The attack was a textbook military invasion, which left massive reported casualties everywhere the Locusts arrived. In the days before the Locust emergence, an epidemic of earthquakes and tremors were reported across Sera, puzzling scientists and journalists. After the first emergence, initial reports by the media reported that grey monsters were emerging from the underground and slaughtering civilians, as told by surviving witnesses. In the early hours of Emergence Day, many believed that this was an elaborate hoax or promotion for a new science fiction film. Others that took the threat seriously initially believed that the Pendulum Wars had started again, or that a military force called the Grozny were attacking. That was until the COG chairman Thomas Dalio made an announcement that a new and foreign enemy was attacking the surface from the Hollow, the underground tunnel network beneath the surface of Sera, which was the home of the Locust. One of the first cities to have reports of an unknown enemy attacking was Jannermont, being one of the first targets due to having a large military base. The attack was personally led by General Rom and Cantus Scourge. After the annihilation of the base, Rom led his army further into the city and started slaughtering civilians. The Locust also attacked the highway leading into Jannermont during the morning work commute, killing civilians that were unaware of the attack. Images of the massacre on the highway were shown on news networks across Sera. The attack on Jannermont would reach a death toll of over 100,000. Among other major cities that were attacked was the capital city of Ephyra. However, a natural bedrock of granite, the Jacinto Plateau, spared many cities in Tyrus from the Locust Horde, namely Jacinto City. While Ephyra was attacked due to natural fissures in the bedrock, as well as subway and sewage tunnels offering access to the city, the COG army managed to fill access points with gas and cement, and were successful in blocking the Locust out of Ephyra, as well as other cities on the plateau. Other locations on Sera were spared due to natural defenses as well. Islands such as the South Islands, the Lesser Islands chain including Vectas and Azura were spared due to abyssal trenches and difficulty digging under the oceans. As for the mainland, all major cities outside of the Jacinto Plateau were attacked and destroyed by the Locust Horde. Emergence Day would eventually end and the Locusts would continue advancing across Sera, destroying everything and killing everyone in their path. Shortly after Emergence Day, census across Sera revealed that 25% of the entire human race was killed in one day and millions more were declared missing. Rumors started spreading that the missing people were being eaten by the Locusts or have been taken as prisoners. In reality, the Locusts did capture millions of humans. Many of the captured were used by Ukon, a lead scientist of the Locust Horde, to replenish their numbers by transforming humans into Locust drones. Other major uses were enslaving humans into labor camps and being fed to Locust creatures. Due to the Locust hatred for the human race, enslaved humans were put through various methods of torture known as processing, which resulted in either lobotomy or death. So why did Emergence Day happen? And what was the ultimate goal for the Locust? Let's look at the events that occurred that led up to this horrific day. Sera's history has always been riddled with war and conflict, dating back 1,000 years before E-Day, with factions across the globe constantly fighting each other for land and resources. These wars were a millennia-long global conflict which nearly destroyed the human race. Eventually, humanity as a whole rejected the war completely as they realized that if they continued down this path of constant war, it would lead to humanity's ultimate destruction. These discussions concluded what was known as the Age of Armageddon and started the Era of Silence. Peace finally arrived in Sera, allowing humanity to focus on rebuilding and developing its culture, science, and arts. This was truly the golden age for Sera, and no one had to die in an ongoing war. However, not everything was perfect. Due to this era of peace, military funding was cut and the population became increasingly worried about the rise of crime and the protection of civil liberties. This was a valid concern by the people of Sera, but there was an even bigger problem coming right around the corner. It became evidently clear that Sera had an energy crisis as their hydrocarbon and nuclear fuel sources began to run out. Humanity was suffering and a new source of energy was desperately needed. It was during this era that humanity discovered a glowing, luminous object beneath the surface of Sera in the Hollow, later labeled as Imulsion. At the time of discovery, it was considered more of a scientific curiosity than a practical use of resources. It was believed to have been created through some unknown evolutionary process by the manure of the riftworms, the gargantuan creatures that lived in the Hollow network, until the amazing work of Dr. Helen Cooper, who created the light mass process which allowed Imulsion to be refined into a fuel for humanity to use. This was the answer to all of Sera's energy problems. The light mass process allowed humanity to end their dependency on fossil fuels and enter the Golden Age. However, Imulsion reserves were exclusive to nations under the coalition of order governments. While the COG continued to reap the benefits of Imulsion, other nations that weren't so fortunate were still facing an energy crisis and were desperate to gain access to Imulsion. Eventually, this sparked a new war between the two main factions, the Union of Independent Republics and the coalition of ordered governments. This war would be labeled as the Pendulum Wars, and its sole objective being the control of the planet's supply of valuable Imulsion. As this war continued on for 79 years, humanity continued to study Imulsion and its effects, which would lead to an even more devastating war. During the Pendulum Wars, the COG constructed Sera, a secret island facility designed as a luxury bunker for society's elite in case of global annihilation. Among the elite was Dr. Niall Sampson. As a resident of Sera, Dr. Sampson helped to build the island into a place of solitude, and his voice was used as inspiring public announcements to encourage the work of other scientists on the island. However, back on the mainland, something was happening that required Dr. Sampson's attention. It was becoming abundantly clear that there were serious health problems with Imulsion, as the mining workers and their families were becoming very sick due to overexposure. Because of this, it is said that these victims contracted a life-threatening condition known as Rustlung. Due to gaining economic and political power from occupying the majority of Imulsion reserves, the COG demanded complete confidentiality regarding its health effects in order to prevent repercussions of releasing a toxic fuel source to the public, and thus losing power over Sera. In reaction to this, the Department of Health opened the New Hope Research Facility to treat the children of Imulsion miners afflicted with Rustlung, many of whom were born with apparent birth defects. Based on his work, Dr. Sampson was appointed as director of the New Hope facility, leading the research into finding a cure for Rustlung. Sampson began his research by injecting the children with daily doses of concentrated Imulsion. He discovered that Imulsion's effects caused cell stress and almost instant death. However, some cases showed that some cells underwent mutations. As the research continued, the scientists realized that they were getting nowhere, until they came across a girl named Mira. During their testing, Mira showed genetic immunity to Imulsion and actually benefited from exposure. Sampson attempted to understand Mira's immunity in order to replicate it in the other children. He saw potential in Imulsion's mutagenic properties for transgenic experiments. Observing the indigenous creatures of the Hollow, he determined that they also had genetic immunity to Imulsion due to their habitat. Sampson then started mutating the children with the DNA of the Hollow creatures. This would end up being a horrific mistake, as the children were mutated into the creatures known as the Sires. The Sires completely lost their sanity and became highly aggressive, and started to attack the staff, making it almost impossible to control them. There was only one Sire that was immune to this, which was the very first test subject. This was the child named Ukon, also known as Patient Zero. When Ukon became a Sire, he retained his mental capacity, but he was just as sadistic as the other Sires. When Ukon was exposed to Imulsion, he gained the ability of accelerated healing when wounded, making him physically immortal. However, there was one thing that could stop him, that being cytostatic gas, which would stop his healing, making him vulnerable. As Dr. Sampson continued his work, the Sires became more aggressive towards the staff and started attacking them. Numerous employees of New Hope resigned and leaked information to the public due to these attacks and the unethical experiments that were being performed on the children. When this information reached Chairman Monroe, he ordered the facility to be shut down and to have all of the scientists indicted. Sampson tried to convince Monroe to allow him to continue his experiments on the Sires, as he saw a potential in using them for military purposes and potentially ending the Pendulum Wars. Monroe did not accept this, and the New Hope Research Facility was shut down. However, unknown to Monroe, a fringe political party within his administration believed that Sampson's work could cure Rustlung and create genetically engineered super soldiers to help end the Pendulum Wars. This group had Sampson and his work moved to a secret facility in Mount Kadar, and he was able to bring his remaining loyal scientists and several of his subjects, including the most valuable one, Mira. As he continued his research at the Mount Kadar lab, he had a breakthrough. Using Mira's embryonic stem cells combined with the sire DNA, he successfully created the hybrid known as the Matriarch. He was finally able to reproduce the hybrids and create his super soldiers, the Locust Horde. The Locusts were genetically stable and able to reproduce. The stem cells used in this process also created a hive mind where Mira had a link to all of the Locusts as well as the Matriarch, giving her complete control over them. As time went on, Mira grew a romantic relationship with Dr. Torres, and the two had a human daughter named Reyna. However, it was discovered that Reyna had inherited Mira's pure immunity. Being terrified of his daughter being experimented on, Dr. Torres fled the facility with Reyna, leaving Mira behind. Failing to recapture Reyna, Dr. Sampson told Mira that Reyna had died during the escape attempt. Mira became grief-stricken and grew a hatred for the scientists and humans in general. The Locusts also became increasingly more intelligent due to being connected to Mira, and began to feel imprisoned by the scientists. As Mira's hatred grew stronger, she began testing her own powers and grew her abilities to control the Locust. It became evidently clear to the scientists that the Locusts had started to obey her. Mira would then become their queen and promised to lead them to salvation. With the Locusts now fully under her control, she led an uprising against the scientists, slaughtering all of the human staff in the laboratory, including Dr. Sampson. Before Sampson's death, he was able to trigger the lab's cryogenic pure protocols, which flooded the entire lab with cryogenic gas in an attempt to prevent any surviving staff from escaping and to kill the Locust. Mira and her Locust escaped and traveled deeper into the Mount Kadar catacombs, where they later established a civilization also known as Nexus. Nexus was the capital city of the Locust Horde, located near the center of the Inner Hollow under Mount Kadar. This is where Queen Mira resided along with her Locust Council in her royal palace. The Locusts began expanding their civilization by building other tunnel cities, forming their own religion, and creating an industry of science and technology. However, the Locusts would run into a problem of their own. 7 years before Emergence Day, while the humans on the surface were fighting the Pendulum Wars, the Locusts in the Hollow found themselves in their own war against Locusts who became infected with lambency, which was caused by overexposure to Imulsion. Lambency has the ability to subvert and mutate its host, with symptoms including luminescent veins and eyes filled with Imulsion and extreme aggression. Those who are infected lose complete control of their free will and become killing beasts, with their only goal being to spread the infection. Upon death, all lambent organisms would explode to release the Imulsion, which would allow the infection to spread to its next victim. As the lambent spread in the Hollow, they began driving the Locust Horde into extinction. As a result of this, Queen Mira became desperate to find a solution to the lambent infection and save her people. During this time, Professor Adam Phoenix, Marcus Phoenix's father, was investigating the disappearance and presumed death of his wife Elaine Phoenix, Marcus's mother. Elaine was a biologist who was studying rock shrew creatures within the Hollow when she discovered the Locust Horde. 9 years before E-Day, she continued observing the Locust within the tunnels near Ephira, but never returned home and was never heard from again. 5 years before E-Day, Adam began to retrace Elaine's steps in order to find out what happened to her. He discovered her journal that mentioned her discovery of the Locust in the Hollow and that she was going to continue observing them before revealing her findings to the public. Adam went into the Hollow himself and found remains and scraps of fabric that he recognized to be Elaine's. Adam also found the Locust and was brought to the royal palace to meet Queen Mira. Due to Adam's intellect and resources, Mira saw him as a potential use for curing lambency and saving her people. Mira then revealed to Adam that if he was not successful, she would launch a global attack and colonize the surface of Sera in order to evade lambency and save the Locust Horde. Adam accepted these terms in order to keep the Locust underground and from committing genocide. However, as the Pendulum Wars raged on the surface, Adam was called on by the Coalition of Order governments to complete the Hammer of Dawn, the orbital satellite-based laser weapon that would end the Pendulum Wars. In the time he had to research lambency, Adam discovered that biological measures and cures were unable to stop its evolutionary rate and that any physical measures would kill the Locust. Adam was eventually successful in completing the Hammer of Dawn, which was then used to end the Pendulum Wars. During this time beneath the surface, the Lambent War reached a crucial stage in which Voldram had the same desires as Queen Mira to invade the surface. Arranging a coup against Uzul Srak, who was the High General at the time, Voldram expressed his belief in the futility of the Lambent War and the future they could have on the surface. Queen Mira then promoted Voldram to Uzul, making him the new High General, and revealed that she too had been planning the attack on the humans. Queen Mira lost complete faith in Dr. Phoenix as lambency continued to spread in the Hollow and more of her people were dying, and so she began preparing to attack the surface alongside her new general, Uzul Ram. All major cities on Sera were targeted, especially those with substantial military or industrial involvement. It was revealed that billions of humans were killed and millions more were missing. Mira's motive for the attack also came from her hatred for humans because of the New Hope scientists who experimented on her people, keeping them underground, and supposedly killing her daughter. She feared that the humans would never accept them, even if they came to them peacefully. She believed that they would either be oppressed, imprisoned, or eradicated if the humans learned of their existence. Mira also believed that the Locusts were a superior race and that they were more deserving of Sera. Due to the horrors experienced in the aftermath of Emergence Day, the survivors believed that those who were killed on E-Day were fortunate enough not to witness what Sera had become and referred to them as the lucky ones. Emergence Day was such a significant event that the calendar system was abolished and replaced with AE and BE, after Emergence and before Emergence. As the Locust emerged on E-Day, the Locust War would begin against Sera and humanity in what would be a 17-year-long war.